may sound silly because we do it all the time, but we're going to put a huge emphasis on this thing called breathing. You guessed it. It's one of the most important things that we do, obviously, and every one of us that is alive and well is breathing, but most of us are not breathing correctly. And it's amazing to look at these numbers, like 20,000 breaths a day. Imagine doing that using the wrong muscles. Imagine using your upper traps, your shoulders while you're shrugging to help you breathe, and realizing that 20,000 reps like that a day, and you wonder why you might be having some headaches throughout the day, or if your neck is bothering you and all sorts of other things going on. It's just crazy to think about. So what we've got to realize with breathing is when we inhale, the diaphragm contracts concentrically, meaning you inhale, then the diaphragm flattens out. And when we inhale, the diaphragm comes down. When you exhale, the diaphragm comes up. And at that end stage, exhalation is facilitated by these deep abdominal muscles that we talked about in episode 1. So I'll show you a quick video here of a diaphragm in action. So you can see we inhale and it goes down, and then we exhale and it goes up. If you can imagine your diaphragm being a dome-shaped kind of figure, when it contracts and shortens, that dome comes down and gets smaller. And then what you've got to realize is what's helping to push this up is internal oblique, external oblique, transverse abdominis. They're going to be involved in exhalation. So we've effectively got this force couple that's working with the diaphragm on the inhale portion with flattening down, then with deep abdominal muscles on the exhale. So suddenly that blowing out sound that you do is making a lot of sense in terms of making the muscles do what they're supposed to do. We can see here it's very important we understand how the diaphragm actually functions. So then we look at this diaphragm and we see that it's asymmetrical because we're all left-hearted. So everyone is going to have some natural built-in asymmetry based on the fact that this is everybody's structure. So literally by nature, we are asymmetrical. And that asymmetry is going to produce some rotational faults that we have to think about in our ability to use our diaphragm. And learning to breathe is going to help us correct some of those faults. So what we want to look at now is some quick facts. So we're in this breathing phase of core training, and just like anything you do with training, you want to evaluate it. So we know that movement into flexion of the lumbar and cervical spine is assisted by exhalation. So if you want stability or to bring your rib cage down, then you exhale. And movement into extension of the lumbar and cervical spine is assisted by inhalation, so bringing the ribs up. And we also know that 10% of people have been diagnosed with breathing disorders. And I would almost even go as high as 50% of adults have a form of a breathing inability. Things like, you can't breathe through your nose. That's why you see a lot of people wearing those nose strips at night for when they're getting ready to go to sleep. And the big thing here is that disordered breathing creates a sympathetic fight or flight state. So when you get somebody who can't breathe, that chest breather, that upper body breather who shrugs their shoulders up and down, that person is always going to be in that sympathetic fight or flight mode. So there's even a bigger reason to work on breathing than just from a core training standpoint. But from a core training standpoint in general, it's going to be, this is going to be central to what we're going to do. And I promise that we'll get there here in a few slides. But this is just a quick review of basically the stress state and the chill state. So there's the fancy terms there with the sympathetic side that we discussed, that person that's breathing with that shrugging motion. You can see what's happening overall to their body when they're constantly in that sympathetic state, versus someone that's understanding how to use their diaphragm properly through breathing naturally in a relaxed state as well as through exercise to keep them in that parasympathetic state. So you can see how important all of that stuff is, and what we can do to put us into that parasympathetic state very simply is just breathing properly. So now we're going to look at our core training being our breathing training and being something that's going to help us create that parasympathetic shift. So this becomes something that's really, really important. So what we're going to do now, and I don't want you to miss this point here with integrating core and breathing, is when doing core work, we're going to think about inhalation through our nose. And let's just say, for example, we're doing a bridging exercise where we're on our back. If I'm bridging my hips up, I'm exhaling, getting a big push of air out. And then if you look at this slide here, you can see what happens in cases where you breathe through your mouth. So I'll just read off of what we have, where you breathe through your mouth, many things that are supposed to happen end up not happening. So the air is going to bypass this part of your respiratory system before it enters your lungs. When you take in air through your nose, these are some of the beneficial things that do occur. The air is warmed and humidified before it hits your lungs. The tiny hairs lining in your nose, they are going to trap other foreign particles before they reach your lungs. Nerves in your nasal passages sense everything about your breathing and relay that information to your body. Nitric oxide, this is big. It's made by your nose, and when you breathe through your nose, you carry a small amount of that gas into your lungs. It helps lower your blood pressure and significantly increases your lungs' oxygen absorbing capacity. So think of like CPAPs, how that goes over your nose. This also kills bacteria, viruses, other germs. So nose breathing will help keep you from getting sick or reduce the likelihood from you getting sick. And mouth breathing is like expecting your body to make use of food by bypassing your stomach. It would be missing some crucial steps in the digestive process, and the end result is obviously not good. So when you breathe through your mouth, none of that positive stuff takes place. So this becomes really important that when you do core training, that you suck air in through your nose and then exhale out like you're blowing the candles out at a birthday party. So basically think of breathing to the point where if you can't hear it, it's probably not good enough. So here's just a quick example of everything that we're talking about here through the breathing process. As we breathe in through our nose, our ribs, chest, diaphragm, everything all together comes out. The diaphragm contracts down. As we exhale and blow all the air out like we're blowing the candles out, that chest is going to contract, the lungs, the diaphragm, everything all together. That diaphragm's then going to relax. So practice this stuff standing and then apply it into something like laying on your back, bridging, as well as in a plank position. So there you have it. This is the why on breathing. And in the next video, we'll be going into exercises that give us that anti-component, because remember, it's not about movement, it's about prevention of movement in core training. And it's about understanding the functional anatomy versus origin insertion anatomy in the this does this and that does that kind of stuff. So we're going to dive into movements that involve anti-rotation, anti-extension, and anti-lateral flexion. And those will be the big key areas that we'll focus on and show you how to do what we're looking to do in those planes. So hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode. Any questions at all, please leave them below, and I will be happy to get back to y'all. See you in episode 3.